Honk.
Hello.
Hello and welcome to episode 171 of The Crate and Crowbar. It is the 12th of January 2017. My name is Chris Thurston and tonight I am joined by the final Tom.
It's me. The last Tom. I've killed all the other ones.
And the Omega Pip.
Hi. I don't know if that's better or worse than...
The one and only.
Yeah.
It's the end. Like,
The end Pip.
Yeah.
Pip to end all pips.
Final form.
Oh dear. That's not very aspirational, is it?
Isn't it?
If you're the last, you've won, surely.
That's right.
Indeed.
I've got nothing else to do.
That's my approach to Tom's, at least.
Yeah.
If you just absorb them all.
Yes, they're part of me now.
Gain the powers of every Tom. Except, well, the other Tom can't stop succeeding.
No,
upwards,
I know.
All the way to Seattle. If you missed Tom's news, Tom Francis, that's where he is. Tom has gone to work on heat signature at Valve's offices, but not as an employee of Valve, because that's a thing. In Seattle for the next 3 months. So we three are all that remains.
We're holding the pod fort
Indeed.
down.
But that brings us on to a little bit of housekeeping. So I know that when, so looking at Twitter and our Discord and things, when Tom announced that a lengthy departure, longer than when he went to Stugan, there were some concerns about, what was going to happen with the Crate and Crowbar. And the good news is that essentially nothing's going to change in terms of us doing weekly episodes. However, there's a bunch of things we would like to do to make this more sustainable and to ensure that we can kind of keep doing it at the standard we want to do it and expand it a bit and find some other fun things to do and more fun people to bring onto the podcast. And the long and short of that is that starting next week, we will be bringing back the Patreon.
Bong, bong, bong.
Thanks, Tom. That's basically what I hoped would happen
Yes.
when I left a pause there.
Oh, sorry. I was just trying to remember how you pronounce it, but yes, that's how you pronounce it. Because I always used to do it wrong.
Patreon.
Yeah, well, I always used to get confused because of the tequila brand.
Patron.
Patron.
Well, yes, so we are bringing back the Expecto Patronus. And the reason for that is twofold. So so basically for a little bit, I'm going to talk fairly openly about kind of how everything fit together initially and how we're going to change it. So, we were on the Patreon for a while. We ended up, for various reasons, not, basically taking any money from it in terms of our own expenses or our own time. We used it to pay for the general expenses of the podcast, to buy the lovely microphones that you're talking now, and then basically saved the rest. And by the time it rolled around, time that we basically realized we weren't doing anything with it because we all did other things, etc. We decided to just stop the Patreon. And the reason for starting it up again is, in addition to us simply having lost a whole bunch of people that made this easier to do every week, somebody would always be available out of the total pool of 6 people. It's also that everyone's life situations are changing. We've been doing this for 3.5 years, and now the value of your time changes. The amount of money you can afford to expend on cabs and transport and web fees and so on changes. So what we would like to do is bring back the Patreon first and foremost with a view to paying expenses for everybody who does the podcast. And that will also, excitingly, hopefully, include guests from further afield. Because something I know I'm keen to do is retain the fact that this is always a discussion in a room with people who have at least a rapport or can kind of establish one. I don't like Skype as a tool for live podcasts. I think we've all done podcasts in that way, and it can work, and it can work for things like isolated segments and things. But
I thought the Not a Game podcast was quite good.
Yeah, I thought the same about the Gaming Daily podcast way back when, which was the predecessor to the Not a Game podcast. But I don't know. Something about Crate and Crowbar I think always benefits from the fact that we're in a room with each other.
Yeah. And
so,
also, if the person is in the room, then that means they can have some of the rum.
Exactly.
It's very important.
I say this as someone who's watching you guys with the rum, and I've got my healing cup of tea.
So that's point one. Because actually, one thing we don't know is how much we're likely to make per episode. We were blown away by the support for the Patreon when we initially launched it. Understandably, the value's gone down over time, which I think is A, general rule for Patreon, and B, understandable because we haven't been talking about it or charging it or doing anything with it for the better part of like 10 months now, I think. So, the reason we are not Patreoning this episode that you're about to listen to is because we want to give everyone who is currently subscribed to the Patreon a chance to get out if they wish. Likewise, we'll also be sending out some sort of message through the Patreon system to alert people. Basically, we don't want anyone to suddenly be surprised when it lurches back to life. We've also got a bit of admin-y kind of stuff to do to figure out exactly how all that stuff's going to fit together. So yeah, first thing, depending on how much money we make, first thing is paying our own expenses and the general expenses of running something like this to ensure that we're kind of making it less of because it's okay for Pip and I because we live in this house, but I know for everyone who's traveled to the pod that it does rack up. Second is to try and bring in, we'll definitely be bringing more guests generally, maybe even thinking about if there's anyone we can find that fits and is local and wants to do this every week, maybe we'll add to that core group again. But also to be able to say to guests a little bit further afield, probably within the UK to be reasonable, but we think your work is cool. Do you want to come and do the podcast? And which is something we've not really done. We've had guests, but it's normally been out of chance and convenience. We can't really say to people, jump on a train.
Yeah. Given UK train fares.
Yeah.
Spend £90 to travel 50 metres.
Exactly. So being able to say, hey, there's an interest there, you like the podcast, you can come on. And obviously if you're listening to this and you are an indie developer and this is of interest and this is something to bear in mind, then being able to pay people, at least people's expenses to do that would be awesome. And I think would be a great new shape for the types of pods we do. If money allows, I know that we're all keen to actually be able to pay ourselves for the time it takes, to record this podcast, to edit it, which is a decent amount of work, even though it probably doesn't sound like it.
You should hear what doesn't make it.
You should, yeah. And also the sort of the surrounding things. And also jump in if I'm forgetting anything. Also, in addition to that, I think we would all like to do more stuff surrounding the pod. We kind of finally successfully experimented with a one-off when Tom and I did the Dishonored, special. There are other things we've got in mind. None of that stuff will be charged for. The Patreon is per episode, and there will only ever be an episode a week as far as the Patreon is concerned. But they will certainly be enabled by whatever we are bringing in from the main podcast.
Yeah.
Patreon.
Basically, if it's more than we need for the upkeep, we can put that money towards trying to do cool other things.
Exactly. So not announcing anything specific yet, partly because we still need to talk about it. And also a lot of this stuff, it's not like stretch goals, but it's in the same territory of how much interest there is governs what we can realistically do.
If we only get 28p an episode, then we fight for it with pool cues. That's your low bar. And Pip will obviously win. And then you just get the Pip special for the rest of time, which is probably fine. Actually, so this shouldn't be seen as an incentive to abandon the Patreon to bring about that dark future. Oh, wait, yes.
So sorry for taking over the first 10 minutes of the podcast with housekeeping, but hopefully all of that makes sense. Long story short, if you're currently a Patreon backer and you do not want to continue to be, get out now before you can be charged a whole $1 or something. If you are not a Patreon subscriber and you'd like to consider it, we're at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. There is out-of-date information there, probably as the time you listen to that, because we're still in the process of getting the rest of that stuff put together. So it'll be next week, really, that it launches properly. But nonetheless, it exists. It's a thing. And thirdly, I'm always around on our Discord channel, and the link for that will be in the show notes and is on the website.
Shall we set up a new channel?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, when
questions
this episode goes live, I will set up or ask the guys, if I don't understand it, to set up an actual chat channel for Patreon related questions, and we can do it that way. Alternatively, you can always at me at Chris in the Discord channel, and I am happy to answer any questions about what we've got planned, apart from literally promising specific podcasts about Bloodborne, because I never want to do that again.
You notice we've not mentioned any specifics about the sort of side pods we want to do, because we're famously quite bad at following through.
Yeah.
But that will change if we have the kind of means.
But that is partly because simply everyone is busy, and there's like, sure. I think we've all, just speaking completely personally, gone through like life shifts over the last 3.5 years from, I don't have anything to do most weeknights, and I will happily wander off to Marsh's graveyard to sit in a room with my friends and talk about games, to most seconds of most days being accounted for in some way, one and another, or at least needing to be able to be. So that's kind of where we're at. And hopefully this sounds like an exciting thing, because it hopefully allows us to kind of, redouble our efforts with this cool thing. Yeah. Because it is a cool thing. I'm still amazed that we have a community of people attached to this that are so rad.
And if you listen to this regularly, and haven't visited our Discord channel yet, I'd really, really recommend you do, because it's such a nice little community of just really friendly, thriving community of lovely people, who just want to chat about games and basically anything, TV or whatever you want to chat about. It's great. Just follow the link on greatcrowbar.com.
So yeah, that's our news, and more information as we figure out what the fuck we're doing. Speaking of semi-abandoned mystery projects, from Bloodborne podcasts to Half-Life 3, there was a bit of news today. Bit of news.
Yes.
Based on an interview, I think a Game Informer interview.
Podcast, I believe.
Podcast interview.
Talked about an interview they'd done. I think he wrote it up as well.
Okay.
With an alleged Valve employee, hard as they are to capture.
Indeed, yeah. A legendary Pokemon of the developer world. Hold on to your master balls. Who said, in basically no uncertain terms, that Half-Life 3 will never happen, and possibly has never really happened in any substantial way.
Yeah.
Wasn't the gist of it basically like Valve maybe would do Half-Life 3 if they were ever happy with any of the ideas, or it had ever worked out, but it hadn't worked out, and that's why it hasn't happened? And basically the conclusion that pretty much everyone had come to anyway, and just writing it all down, really. Yeah,
there is an element of that. There are some interesting tidbits in there that are a little bit too weird to possibly be false. Not that that's necessarily, I don't think that's an acceptable barometer of truth, really, unless you are in the X-Files. But, there's the notion that there was a design for it that was going to be an RTS, and a design for it that was going to be like basically an FMV Telltale style game with live actors, both of which sound like stupid ideas, really. But who am I to say?
I don't know, games have done weirder things. You just take a property and you just tinker around with it, and if something works, you do that, and if it all doesn't, you just go, well, no one needs to know about that because we never announced it, bye.
No, indeed. But I did realise that if you combine strange FMV storytelling with live actors and an RTS, you get Command and Conquer. So
amazing.
Half-Life 3 is Command and Conquer 5.
I'd love to see that.
There wasn't a Command and Conquer 5, was there? Or was there?
Don't think there was.
There was Red Alert 3.
Yeah.
So technically, yes.
There are a lot of Command and Conquer games.
There are a lot of Command and Conquer games, but nonetheless,
not
a
CSC5. To FMV home video, like Home Alone 5 or whatever, you're just kind of at that point, they're just phoning it the fuck in. They're just going, hire a guy who looks kind of like the original star that we had. It's fine. Well, and there's one hanging on proper person from it who couldn't get work anywhere else, and that's how they pay their mortgage.
I suppose they did themselves a favour in that regard, because Gordon Freeman is basically the only game protagonist who looks like a game developer. You could easily, any given studio in the world, you could find somebody that you could get to play Gordon Freeman in a daft live action version of Half-Life. I don't know who would play anyone else, though.
I'm quietly quite glad that there isn't a Half-Life 3. If this is all true, I'd be quite glad for it not to be true, because I think the worst thing, whatever they would release under the Half-Life banner now would be trashed, or people get incredibly excited, and the hype and the expectations still are so high around it that it would just be misery.
Do you
whatever
think
happens.
Higher misery or lower misery than the No Man's Sky situation?
I don't know. I think it would be higher because of Valve's just, I mean, they're so kind of mimetic in internet terms, in terms of like how ingrained they are in Reddit and in those communities, that a backlash against Valve would be even worse, I think, and like more furious against No Man's Sky, perhaps.
I don't know. I mean, it depends what they promised. Like, I always had this theory that if they ever announced it, they would announce it as they released it. Like, it would just materialize
like
one
Beyonce.
day. Yeah. Like,
just be like, here's lemonade, motherfuckers.
Yeah. Exactly.
That'd be amazing, yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's probably the right way to do it, because then people would just be happy with whatever they got.
Right.
I think a lot of people at this point want an end to that story. It's a bigger deal to people than wanting like another epoch-defining first-person shooter campaign.
The story's
It's a bit
good.
No, it's not really.
Really?
It's a compelling world.
I love the world. I love like the place, but do I care about what happens next after Eli's gone? I don't really care.
I don't think I even cared to finish the first one. Like, and that's probably sacrilegious or something, but whatever.
I want to play a new game from Valve, and like a new thing that they've come up with. I'd rather play a new game from them than Half-Life. I'd rather play a new game than Left 4 Dead 3, and I fucking love Left 4 Dead. I just want to see what those brains are coming up with, what they're kind of, even if it's a VR thing, I don't care. If it's new, I'll be really excited if Valve are making it.
Do you know what though? Maybe because they essentially just live in a big money cube with like Teflon sides that no one can get into. And Tom. But like, I wonder if maybe they have made all of these things and they just play them all themselves and they just,
bastards.
there's no
like
need
Prince,
to
actually.
No need.
Like Prince. Who recorded all his albums that he just locked away in a vault.
He did, but that was because his label refused to publish them because they physically couldn't shift enough copies in time. That's why he tried to escape. That's why he changed his name to a symbol, apparently, is because Anyway.
So, I mean, I suppose that establishes, which was really the point of this discussion, that Valve is still more like Beyonce than they are like Prince.
Well, quite right.
Yeah.
Also, if the Patreon thing doesn't work out for us, we could just start charging people every time they make the whatever, blah, 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 Half-Life 3 confirmed joke on the internet.
How do we charge people for what they do on the internet? Because if we can figure that out, we don't need to do any of this shit anymore.
No, maybe if we just make it really clear in the terms of like using the Discord or like the PC Gamer comments thread that there's like a swear box essentially for like the Half-Life 3 like confirmed nonsense, then maybe, I don't know, Reddit could make a fucking fortune if they did that though.
I think
swear box.
I think that might be the final form of the internet, would be your tweet will be moderated if you say any of these things, or if you give us a quid. You say what you like. That's our dark future.
Yeah.
Speaking of them. So yeah, there is Ceci Nepin in Half-Life. I don't know where I'm going with that. It's not a Greek thing. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Because you both love Dota, and you must be pretty
Great
happy.
seg, Tom. Thanks for recognizing
happy with what Valve have been doing for the last few years. I feel like I'm in a different position because for me, like Valve games have gone away in the way because Dota's so just not my kind of thing. So do you guys want a new Valve game?
We just did get a new Dota, really.
That's true.
Yeah, like
Dota.
I don't know, because I think Chris and I have very different thoughts about Valve as a business. I know that, like, not to go into specifics, but we've had arguments about our different sort of approaches to, for example, how particular things have been monetized, or how, how the rhetoric about them goes in the media, or in specifically the games media's way of talking about Valve. And so I don't know, to me they're a kind of company that, like, my opinion changes a lot, and I feel like I haven't played a new thing from them in such a while that, like, although I trust that they do interesting things because they have the luxury of money and kind of not really giving a shit in a lot of ways, that, I don't have a handle on what else they're actually capable of. They're kind of capable of keeping things going and of finding ways to make people want to to pay money or give them, you know, community created content that they can plug into things and make money from, and give people the opportunity to sort of profit from a bit themselves. But like, I think I still don't really, I currently don't feel like I have a sense of what they're capable of apart from that, like what they're capable of as specifically individually creative, unique forces, if that makes sense.
It's difficult to say what that team is capable of as a whole, because you haven't really seen it. Like, you know, they still have, you know, fantastic writers and by all accounts great, you know, technical developers and artists, and, you know, they keep, you know, doing all the work, but they haven't applied it to necessarily something new. I think Dota's an interesting one, because obviously through covering that game and through the last couple of years, it's given me far greater access to Valve than I've ever had. And I've met plenty of individual members of that team and visited the office, and I have a sense of them as people and kind of what their priorities are. And I think there are some, you know, remarkable things about how small that team is relative to size of game, you know, given that, you know, there are whole companies dedicated to maintaining a game like that. Valve's, you know, in terms of people, it's the amount of people invested in keeping Dota going is remarkably small. But Dota's in a weird place because it has this sort of enigmatic anonymous designer in IceFrog who is associated with almost all of these decisions that get made, all these balance changes and the sort of changing life of the game. The actual kind of expressive design stuff, the things that give you a sense of, you know, there being a group of people behind this thing rather than just anonymous hands maintaining a service. But it's actually impossible to tell what comes from IceFrog and what comes from other designers who work on the project, or, you know, at what stage things go to artists and so on, and kind of what that process is like. You see it sometimes, and you know, for a while everyone knew that there was like a bot AI guy. And, you know, I'm pretty sure that the reason in the last update they allowed bot AI to be something that the community could program and share was probably because bot AI guy wheeled his wheelie desk off somewhere else. And that was, you know, then a role offloaded onto the community. It's kind of hard to derive of a personality though, because they're so unlike other developers in that regard. Like, they don't have a community manager going out in front of the community every week and saying, hey, what's up YouTube? This is what we've been doing. And they've got reasons for that, and I've asked them about it before. But yeah, like, I think certainly playing that game and paying close attention to that game has meant that I've had a sense of what Valve is doing, particularly as they've done like the short films and things that have grown out of groups of developers, and now become like a little film team within Valve that go off and create these sort of human interest documentaries, which is a kind of interesting thing that didn't exist before. But I would agree that there's like not as strong a sense as there used to be of Valve as a game creating studio, so much as a vast well of resources and talent that is applied to much older ideas like Counter-Strike and Dota and
or even
Team
just
Fortress.
in sort of interesting but small scale things, you know, like either attached to an existing property, so, you know, like a cartoon or a, you know, a source film thing, or a, you know, a particular element or a sub thing, you know, like a VR project, you know, all of the little things that knitted together to make the lab. But like, I don't have any sense of them currently being capable of a large scale complex thing,
like a full
creative
product.
endeavor that requires a lot of different communication and things, and none of the snippets that I read in interviews about, you know, clicks and flat structure and, you know, particular people having sway in particular ways, none of that seems to, you know, and obviously, like, I don't have, like, access in a way that tells me if any of this is true or not. It's just the odd things that you hear. But, like, there's the things that I have seen or have been attributed to sources don't give the impression of a studio that is communicating in a way that enables these large projects, because it just gets factionalized, or people drift off, or they get distracted, or they go to a different team, or they, you know, or someone else decides, oh, well, you've worked on that for a while, it doesn't seem to be going anywhere, do other things, you know.
Yeah. But remember when they released Alien Swarm?
Yeah.
I think there's almost so much kind of media and audience attention heaped on every single possible Valve release now that they almost couldn't just release an Alien Swarm now. Like there's almost like too much risk involved in releasing a thing that is just a kind of a fun little thing that people can experiment with, even if it's free.
Do you think it would be better if they just did that thing that some companies do of just having a game jam and just putting everything out there so that it lessens the pressure on anything that does come out, because so much will be there? Or, you know, it's like, hey, we worked on this thing, we never released it, but have a play with it. Maybe you want to mod it, maybe the assets could be useful to someone, maybe it's interesting, you know. Like, I would absolutely love just a blog of, like, you know, just ideas that didn't make it and we're not going back to, or, you know, thoughts that we have about a thing, or, you know, just anything. I think that would be, I don't know, it just, obviously it's not in their interest for whatever to do so, and maybe it's people, you know, partly why would you want to put yourself in the firing line of the internet in the current state that it's in, you know. I do really feel for studios that have any form of attention, so I get that it might not be desirable, but I think maybe if one of the factors was, you know, the scrutiny that a thing would get placed under being enough to break it, then putting out a lot of things would maybe spread that pressure and change people's expectations.
I mean, I think that's certainly more broadly true of Steam, which that's the direction it took, from a kind of curated selection of Valve's games plus big other things, to including lots of indie games, to the greenlight process, to where it is now, where it's kind of just everything. And they clearly saw no benefit in curation anymore. So I kind of agree with you. Like, if they took that own process, that approach to their own releases, they'd be putting out everything. And in doing so, devalue the associations of Valve with quality and with, you know, I think that maybe they put themselves in a weird place because they didn't really release any bad games that I can think of.
Well, I guess Ricochet, but I don't know.
But that was back in the old, like, that was like saying, like,
when, right?
you know, Deathmatch Classic, you know, like there's
everything they've done has been,
which was great.
I mean, there was some controversy around Left 4 Dead 2 because it was seen as being like a, you know,
it's a mission pack from Left 4 Dead 1, really.
Exactly. Yeah, and that perception earned them some negative publicity, but yeah, it was almost as though they've had too much. Like, they've been love bombed for everything they've ever done, and now the pressure is to do something that will match up to that. When I would loved Alien Swarm. I played it for 20 hours and had loads of fun with it. I never made a level for it, which I felt like is what they really wanted people to do. But it was still a cool thing.
I mean, like, to be honest, like, to bring it back to the start, like, in my opinion, all Half-Life 3 would have needed to be is a best-in-class shooter campaign, but not unprecedentedly so. Like, as good as something like Titanfall 2 or, or whatever, that tied off that world in a way that people found satisfactory. And the hype alone would probably carry it in most people's expectations.
Yeah. Too late now, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is too late now. But I can also imagine why that prospect isn't exciting to people as developers. Like, make a competent sequel to this thing.
Especially when you've got Portal 2 bouncing around your office. Like, what are you going to work on? Are you going to work on another first-person shooter that's just kind of building on all those foundations? Or are you going to work on this time-bending, crazy puzzle game?
Puzzle, first-person comedy musical.
One of the things that's weird to me is that I think I saw a few comments on the ends of articles just saying, well, if they're not going to do anything with it, why not sell it to a different, developer and let them get on with it? And it's like,
why would you do that?
That's not the point. No. Surely it's just like the other developer could make their own good game and it doesn't matter whether it's part of the Half-Life-verse. And the other thing is, like, if there isn't a good idea from that company yet that they're excited to make, then why do you want a thing to be released on that, under that banner? Like, what? It just baffles me. It's kind of like, I want this thing, but, I haven't really thought why I want it, or like any of the parameters that are thus involved. It's just like, why hasn't somebody made my dream game, and can someone sell it to the people that can?
Yeah.
You're like, what?
I love that we spent the better part of 20 minutes describing the featureless obsidian hypercube that our friend vanished into.
Yeah. Tom's listening to this right now, like
he probably is,
either nodding or shaking his head, depending on what he knows.
Yeah,
well, he's just sat there playing all of the games.
Yes,
isn't
yeah.
Like,
he's playing all of those free games.
We should stress that, like, despite Tom heading off to Valve to do things, we have no idea.
We do not know anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
completely clueless.
Yeah, so
we know he poached an egg because he posted that on Twitter.
That's true.
Okay,
I saw that.
All right, yeah.
But that was in his apartment, so I don't like.
Egg
that's
confirmed.
That's
not a Valve game.
Helpful, is it?
No, it's not. Shall we talk about what we've been playing? We used to do that.
Yes.
Back
Tom.
last year.
What? Yeah, 2016.
So long ago.
It was ages ago, to be fair. And also, we didn't really talk about what we've been playing in the last podcast because we just talked about every game forever.
Yeah.
For 3.5 hours. Tom, what have you been up to?
Finally playing Stellaris, which was released. It came out of early access pretty much like mid last year. Is that right? Early last year.
I think it came out. I don't think it was ever in early access.
Oh, really? It just sort of came out and I ignored it. And despite like loving 4X games and especially and space.
I think it did that thing of like the Paradox games of releasing and then not feeling that it was right until the
it wasn't in early access. It was in
the
first 6 months of Paradox.
Release.
Yes. That is definitely a thing that Paradox games go through where they come out and they're not actually probably ready.
Paradox 1.0
That's
is
right. It's
beta.
For sure. So I think I just like instinctively treated it as an early access game and like just left it alone for 9 months. I've come to it this week and I'm really, really enjoying it, even though I'm only about a third of the way into a traditional kind of length campaign for it. I think the early phases for that game are just so satisfying and exciting for a 4X strategy game. Like the exploration phase is just beautiful, slick. The interface is amazing for just moving things around and finding stuff. The kind of little text adventures that they weave into this 4X texture is really fascinating and interesting. And as a kind of sci-fi novel buff, just seeing the little kind of glimmers of inspiration from all over the place pop up through this quest line here that leads to a precursor race that has this sort of type of attitude that leads you on to discoveries about for new technology and new kind of ways of structuring your society. It's all the kind of nerdy sci-fi stuff that I love, woven into this normally very fusty format for games. And there's something very fast and elegant about its storytelling in an otherwise normally very plodding kind of type of interaction. And I think Stellaris is really excellent for having kind of merged something like a Sunless Sea with a Galciv and making it accessible and much quicker. And I'm absolutely loving it so far. I think it's great.
That's a good comparison, actually. I never thought about this on the C comparison. I mean, actually on that, I believe that Alexis Kennedy did a bunch of writing for the next expansion.
Yeah, the latest, the last update was called Kennedy after, I believe must have been after his writing contribution.
So there you go. Yeah. There's the direct link.
That's the direct link there. But it really shows mechanically as well as just in the, the fact that he's written for them. It really is just a way of merging the Failbetter's type of storytelling with a kind of complex strategy game that also, amazingly for Paradox strategy games, notoriously difficult to get into, notoriously just hard to pass and hard to kind of get your head around. I think Stellaris is the first properly good, accessible big strategy game they've done.
That's a relative term to their other games.
Yeah,
it is possible for somebody with an existing interesting grand strategy. Like, it isn't literally 3 times more complicated than Civ, which every other game they've made is at least.
That's very true. But I would say that Stellaris is much easier to get into than Civ 6. I would compare those, and I think the systems and the resources are much more easily understood thanks to just the way they tooltip stuff and the tutorial and the way they show stuff on the map. I think that of the 2 games, the interface in Stellaris is far superior to Civ 6. I've got loads of problems with Civ 6's interface anyway, but Civ is supposed to be the big accessible kind of gently ease you into the 4X thing, whereas actually now Stellaris is far more efficient to that and far better.
I do find that the fact that it takes place not in real time, but that it is not a turn-based strategy game is an accessibility barrier. I mean, you can pause at any time, but it's more like something like SimCity in that regard. It's a string of notifications that you need to deal with.
Yeah.
Whereas a turn system is so easily understood and gives people the ability to explore at their own leisure to some degree.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think what happens with the turn system is that it's easy to kind of it chunks a lot of the information for you, which is good. But the negative side of that is that it creates an enormous queue of tasks. That every time you press end turn, you get it's like your inbox fills up with 25 things to do. Whereas the ongoing kind of, the CloudSpitz engine, the thing that, Paradox have done with all of their games for from Hearts of Iron to Crusader Kings 2, EU, they've all had this kind of real-time pause thing where things trickle in and you deal with them and actually get to think about them properly instead of just going through the motions and checking off each bit of the list. And I find that quite liberating actually because, something can occur to me as events are unfolding. I can just pause it and execute right there, right in the middle of, I feel like I'm cutting through the game to make a decision. And something quite powerful about that I don't get from turn-based strategy games.
The other thing is that when you get to the later stages of something like Civ, you might as well just go brew a cup of tea every time you take a move.
Yeah.
I mean, I've not reached the end game of Stellaris yet, but the end game of 4X games is always the most problematic bit. It's always the most boring bit. And to be honest, looking at the Stellaris kind of victory conditions, they're quite dull. It's just like, conquer 40% of this or create a federation that's 60% of the other. And I'm not sure why that's interesting. And also my interactions with other alien species have been incredibly dull so far. And it feels like for something that creates such a good sense of, alien intrigue in its first third, for you to then interact with these beings and have just the standard, I'm going to form a trade treaty with you. Oh, you don't want that? I'll throw some money in. Okay, fine. Now they're just all just like crinkly four-headed humans, like in the Star Trek mold.
All of them are minor birds.
Really?
Literally, humanity broke out into the stars and it's just fucking parrots.
It's full of fucking parrots. Fucking birds.
Forever.
Had a cool kind of tortoise race.
Excellent.
Yeah, very nice. But they're all the same and they're all this kind of, you see the icons next to them and that say that, these are isolationist and these are, like xenophobic. But, their speech is sort of written to represent that, but the way they behave, like they might throw you out of their territory, but I don't know. It just feels like they haven't followed through completely mechanically with
it's
that
like
stuff.
The whole, like that, the brilliant atmosphere of the exploration thing is because it's like, it is totally like Arthur C. Clarke. Space feels unknown and unknowable, but then when you start meeting alien races, it becomes Star Trek. It becomes like, or Babylon 5 or something. It's,
it becomes, absolutely right.
There's like, my entire people is defined by the fact that we love slavery or whatever it is for that particular race of parrots.
Or his racist isolationist tortoises.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, I found a pre-space flight civilization of chill fungus. Like, and I'm going to uplift them so they can be my vassal, right? Everyone, like, it's basically probably impossible to build a strategy game that lives up to the sort of simulation promise of the beginning of Stellaris, simply because you couldn't discover a species that has no cultural sense of language, money, borders, conquest. Like, you couldn't have a species that was totally alien in terms of human style motivations and beliefs and stuff.
Yeah.
Because then you can't really have a contest, is it? It's
but
we win.
What you do, yeah.
There must be a kind of middle ground because, like you're saying, you've got these races and they're sort of these broad brush kind of cultural kind of, I guess, shorthand for understanding how to deal with them. But it's like when you have any space set dramas and you land on the desert planet, and it's never a thing where there's a desert at the equator or there's a desert for a particular reason. It's like the whole thing is a desert and there's no sense of other biomes because this is not conducive to,
the old joke that if a Star Wars character ever landed on Earth, the mind would be blown by the planet that is every planet.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
But maybe it is an unreasonable expectation, but I don't know. I feel like I get more of that vibe from Endless Legend, for example.
I was going to mention the Endless games, yeah.
Because I don't know, it feels like the way those factions mechanically work sync so well with the way they're written and the way they address you and the way that they kind of behave. They really feel like cohesive kind of peoples.
Have you played Endless Space 2?
Not yet.
No, me neither.
No. But they suffer from being incomprehensible to me.
Yes.
I'm like, I have sat down with this thing for like an hour and a half and I still don't understand what this thing is or why I'm here or where this goes or what this part of the turn is for.
I want to mash Stellaris into Endless Legend because that's exactly what Endless Legend needs, is the type of readability that Stellaris has. Stellaris has like a similar number of like resources, like in terms of, like you get 4 or 5 resources and there are like 3 modifiers. And that sounds awful, but you can mouse over everything. It tells you exactly what it does and what you need to do to kind of take advantage of it. Whereas, Endless Legend is totally the opposite. It's like, what does dust do? They call it like dust. Like, what the fuck is dust? That's a meaningless thing in my world. Oh, it's magic dust. What does that mean? Can I use it to power generators? Can I use it to, one race it is made of that dust and that is like, it is people.
Yeah, it's basically mana, like, essentially, like magic kind of.
But you called it dust. You didn't tell me what it was. So, I'm never going to be able to use that.
In a kingdom of dust, one man has a Hoover.
It's just, I find the Endless stuff, like, it's too granular and it doesn't provide you enough sort of context to actually, all right.
The dust is too granular.
But, like, there's not enough to actually spin it into anything. Like, it's not, you can't make the sugar granules into candy floss. Like, it just sits there and is...
You use it to build things, grains. But also you don't, because sometimes it's good for research. And it's like, it just needs to be explained to you properly, which Endless Legend is terrible at doing. I like having these alien kind of concepts in games, like the idea that a magic dust could be an amazing thing that could be, an energy source and also this other thing. But you gotta tell me about it, otherwise, how the hell am I have to read a fucking novel in the wiki in order to understand?
Well, it's a point where, like, because I've talked about it with the RPS guys, and it's like John Walker and I agree on that front, and it's like, I would rather do my tax return. And partly that's because I quite enjoy doing my tax return, because I find it quite straightforward.
It's January.
I know, right? But also just because, like, that is a thing where you mouse over the question mark online and it's like, that's what this thing is. That's what the information I need from you right now. And Endless Legend does not do that. Yeah, most 4X don't. They're just kind of like,
no. Bleh. I think, like, I love the way Endless Legends interface feels, because I think it feels great when you know what you're doing. But it's not welcoming in any sense. I think it's gorgeous.
Like, it feels like a really badly designed CMS. To me.
I don't think that's fair.
Because I'm like, I don't know what you want from me.
It's like
having interactivism badly designed CMS is way better.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. But it's like, I don't know, it's like, I think maybe it's needlessly kind of, it has an internal, logic that isn't necessarily clear to you if you haven't played it.
It's for people who play 4X.
Yeah.
And it is not for people who don't, and it is not for people who want to start.
Which is a shame, because like the fantasy of it and the stuff it does, like narratively with those factions, is totally for people who don't play 4X, who think that, it's all just kind of, historical archetypes all over again. Like Endless Legend completely throws that in the bin and says, these are amazing, exciting fantasy kind of...
Do you want to be a mushroom?
Be a mushroom that just facilitates trade or something.
Exactly.
And can't go to war.
Yeah, and it sounds gorgeous and the art is lovely.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, Amplitude is a really exciting studio, and I can't wait to see them kind of develop, because they've gotten better and better with everything they've done so far.
They've been bought by Sega.
They have a really good match, I think.
Which is such an interesting thing that Sega have quietly transformed into like the PC strategy people.
Yeah, for sure.
Who would have thought that was going to happen?
Yeah, they've got Relic, they've got
Creative Assembly.
Yeah, any strategy game you want to play on PC that's big budget and good.
That isn't by Blizzard.
That isn't by Blizzard.
And isn't by Valve, apparently.
Not yet.
I'd really like if they started doing mobile versions, though, because those necessarily get simplified
like
a bit.
Civ Revolution kind of thing.
And so, you can maybe get a flavour of for example, the different races and the different stories and things that you guys are talking about without having that, click on a million things, visit a million submenus, hover over a number you don't understand, and then just give up.
Yeah, and so many of those games are still just about war, really. They are about, like, go and conquer this style, go and get this territory. And it's it feels like that they need to broaden that out as well. Those games are going to be interesting.
Shall we talk about the week we've had, Pip?
We can do. Sorry, my foot is going through your Warhammer box.
Great.
Sorry.
Well, at least I would like to talk a little bit about the time I spent playing Paladins this week.
Okay.
Which is a game that I sort of played when it was first. This is Hi-Res's shooter, what looks quite a lot like Overwatch, particularly now. And I first played it back when it was more like a MOBA. It was in a very different place as a shooter.
Was that when I was doing a preview for it?
It was a year ago at least. Actually,
like
the first time I played it was when I was at Hi-Res, about a year ago. So that was the first time I sat down to play it. It was a very different game then, and it was a sort of mishmash, a lot of different ideas, like a card system and a deck building system and some kind of in-game item system like a MOBA, but in a shooter, and big maps and objectives and stuff. And I didn't really get it. And I started playing it, skip ahead. I started, we played a little bit of it, in order to just be ready for Hi-Res Expo in Atlanta, which is what is the Smite World Championship is now called. And so we headed over there, and I went, to be ready, and you'd already played a bunch of it. I started playing it, and I've been, playing it since we got home, and I am really impressed by it, as a bit of game design. And there are things about it that, give me pause. And so to get them out of the way first, because I know that, because I've actually even made a valiant attempt to defend some of these things, and I'm now giving up. Like the art, for example. I remember, I also admire Smite a lot for the way it is designed, but I remember when I used to stream it, having to kind of answer for its art style to, our community. And rightly so, because it's got the worst excesses of a free-to-play buy your character model aimed at teenage boys. The female character designs are pretty terrible, across the board.
Well, they're certainly not varied.
They're certainly not varied. Every woman in it is a 90s comic book superhero, in a loincloth and a bra, and
not really most of a bra.
Yep, some basically just, pasties and loincloth.
Kind of a scarf.
Yeah, or
that is sort of wrapped around the nipple.
Yeah, exactly. So that is an endemic problem, and it is off-putting, and I think it's a shame, because I think there is genuine design talent. If you made the kind of grey box version of that game, there's loads of great ideas. So that's the thing. Paladins has that issue. I would argue to a lesser extent than Smite, but it definitely has it. And that they've established at least some variety. They even redesigned one of the original characters and gave her just a cooler outfit, and it wasn't just like a mini skirt and a crop top. But it still is what it is, and I think it's a little bit cynical, honestly, or even a lot cynical towards how you sell characters in games. They're not the only free-to-play company to get into that territory, but I think a lot of companies, notably Riot, are leaving it, in terms of their particular female character designs.
Yeah,
but nonetheless,
certainly the last couple of years they've come up with some really interesting ones.
Yeah. They were the company that basically invented sell a French-made skin and you'll sell more copies of the game, you'll sell more stuff to teenagers, and they've gotten to a much more interesting place, and it'd be nice to see Hi-Res get there. Maybe they are, because Paladins is more hopeful in that regard. But the other side of it, in terms of those sort of initial impressions thing, is how much it resembles Overwatch. And so, when they, I think, redesigned it, made it faster, and made it more of a shooter, I suspect maybe to make their lives easier, they just took stuff that worked from Overwatch and applied it to the game. So you have a big tank guy who looks like a knight who deploys a big wide shield in front of him. And there is a small, appallingly voice acted dwarf engineer who makes turrets. And there is a archer who is he's not Japanese explicitly, but he is certainly modeled after a samurai archer in this particular fantasy world. There is there are characters that just have abilities that are basically there's a character who basically has Mei's ice block ability from Overwatch, and it appears in different contexts. There's a character with a hook. There's all of these different things. And so when I first started playing it, it's pretty easy to be pretty cynical and only notice the ways in which it's like Overwatch.
And having played it more and watched like the grand finals of their esports thing that happened over the weekend and things like that, I found my opinion of it do like a big 180 and then go in the other direction, because actually I burned out really hard on Overwatch, and haven't particularly enjoyed watching Overwatch as an esport. And
it's a mess.
It's a mess.
Or I think it is. Yeah. I don't find it enjoyable or comprehensible particularly.
Yeah. I feel like underneath all of those ultimately cosmetic problems is a really well-designed team shooter that uses so one of my other concerns was that as they changed the game and redesigned it, that always seems like a bit of a danger sign, right? Like particularly when they've overloaded it with lots of features but kind of kept them in some form or another, like a deck building system, like an in-game item system.
Yeah.
They've kept all of that stuff, but it genuinely works, and it genuinely solves problems about that genre that I don't think Overwatch has figured out really how to solve. And so, one good example of this is, it's pretty straightforward. You pick your character from your role, and you, in a competitive match, there are picks, and there will ultimately be picks and bans, which Overwatch doesn't have. And then once you're in a character, you are that character for the rest of the match. And that, because they never entertained the idea of character switching, which is what Overwatch's design is built around, Blizzard used to be very open. I mean, they've dialed back from it, and I think it's because they realized it was a mistake. They thought they could balance a game where anyone could switch to any character any time. And then they realized they couldn't do that if you could have multiples of the same character. So they moved that to its own mode and made the official version of Overwatch only one of each person, which is an awkward compromise where you open the character select menu in the spawn area at any given time, and you will be only shown the characters that somebody isn't,
right? Which
is kind of weird. Paladins is built around the idea that you pick your draft and then that's your draft, which I think is more legible, is more kind of, I find a little bit more compelling generally. It places the onus of team composition at the beginning of the game, and that's a discussion you then have once, and you avoid the Overwatch problem of people screaming at each other to change. And also in an esports context, it makes it much more legible who's doing well and what their job is and what they're doing, because it doesn't ask an audience to understand the concept of a tank who can be any one of 3 different characters in a given match. You just follow that guy as he does that thing. And that I think is much more elegant. The way it allows you to then be reactive to the way your opponent is playing is through buying upgrades for your character over the course of a match, which are divided into different categories, and you can have one upgrade in each category. So the example is like your attack upgrade. You can choose like a straight up boost to damage, which might be good in some circumstances, but you could also choose, for example, to do bonus damage to shields, or to do to change it so that after you hit somebody, they take reduced healing for a certain period of time, which allows really interesting things. So Overwatch at the moment is basically defined by the tank meta. The correct way to play it is mostly tanks, some damage, healers. And that's because tanks on an objective are always going to be a good thing, and a lot of matches are going to come down to who can stay on the objective for longer, assuming equal trades of big ultimate abilities and damage and so on. Because over the course of a Paladins game, even if the characters don't change, the relative usefulness of, for example, healing and shields rapidly diminish. If people pick up the right upgrades, by the end of the game, you're doing 90% less healing, or shields are going down, 100% faster because like a bunch of damage characters have all picked up those upgrades that they don't have access to at the start. And that gives like a character to compositions that allow them to be late game minded or early game minded. So lots of tanks and shields and healers is great for the first couple of attempts at a capture point, but after a while it becomes less useful. And that's a really interesting dynamic to pick into. Maybe it's not, maybe I will bore everyone to death by trying to explain why that's super interesting, but it means that it gives players interesting choices to make on their own terms in the course of a match. And it also means that people who may be playing one character and used to playing it in a particular way have to adjust how they play that character over the course of a match to react to the changing circumstances and power levels of different people in the game. And that, I think, is super cool. And then there's just the fact that like the abilities are awesome, and like where the characters are a lot like Overwatch characters, maybe it's less obvious, but there are characters in the game whose skill sets are super cool, particularly actually on the support side, on the healing side, where you can do stuff that feels far more like high skill cap and kind of exciting, and you're allowed to have far more game impact than a kind of equivalent character in Overwatch. So the example I give, and I'll stop banging on about Paladins shortly because I appreciate I'm probably boring everyone to death, but there's a character called is it Ying? It is Ying, isn't it, in Paladins? Who's probably one of the worst female character designs in the game, as it happens, like a sort of genie with no clothes on. But ostensibly she's a healing character, but they've given her like multiple parts of like an illusionist ability set and like a kind of fast teleporting, high accuracy attacker ability set. So her deal is she creates illusions of herself that are like static floating versions of herself that heal nearby allies. And that's her basic thing. And it's on a short cooldown. You can just keep creating them. And it's pretty obvious which one's the real one, but it's going to be momentarily confusing. You can do mind gamesy things. She has the ability to teleport to the location of the furthest illusion from her at the time when she casts the teleport spell, which means you can sort of swap around within your own sort of nest of illusions, or like throw an illusion up onto a cliff and dive in, or throw one behind you, dive in to try and get a kill and dive back out again, which are all pretty interesting. Kind of like just that in itself has a whole skill cap thing. And then anytime she has like a mirror, you can break the mirror, which causes all of the illusions you currently have active to fly towards the nearest enemy and explode for loads of damage. So your heal nests are also potentially like deadly bomb nests. You can throw them out as nukes or throw them out as sustained things. Her ult, like most ults in Paladins, isn't as big a deal as the rest of her kit, which I think one of the reasons they make it so that you're not just trading ultimates all day and whoever trades ultimates more effectively wins. It's just like a big heal, basically. But that, that can be sort of game changing, but more often than not, the really cool stuff is like just the little minute to minute plays of like threading together all these abilities. I find it really like compelling. And then above that, you have the card system, which is a major part of the way. It's a free to play thing. You get cards from chests and you build a hand of 5 cards that you can then invest points in upgrading for each character. And these characters are a limited set. It looks like maybe 20 cards per character total, and you pick 5 of them. And they alter your abilities a bit like runes in Diablo.
Okay.
Just to inherit that system from completely left the field. So it might be that, okay, now when you swap places with an illusion, you create an illusion where you were.
Right.
Or something like that. Or you can swap back within a certain window of time. And even though that does sound massively overcomplicated, and it kind of is, it means that you have your version of that character who works in a particular way and is geared in a particular way. And then in the context of a match, then you make in-match decisions about the specific ways you're going to upgrade yourself. Also, you can ride a horse. And that's everything I have to say about Paladins and why it's good. But actually, I've been dead impressed by it. I'm definitely going to keep playing it. And because it's free, and they do the high-res, the definitely laudable high-res thing of offering you like an ultimate pack that includes every character forever.
Yeah.
So you never have to ever buy a character again. And that's, I think, $20. So it's only about 15 quid.
Pretty good.
I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth a go. And I'd say it's definitely worth a go, even if A, it's resemblance to Overwatch, and B, its broader art style put you off.
Who's it for?
Me?
But I mean, if people are playing Overwatch, like Overwatch has a massive audience now, it's clearly doing quite well. Is it for people who have bounced off that? Is it for people who like shooters? Is it for people who like MOBAs? I
think if you like shooters and MOBAs, that is the cop-out answer, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a good option in terms of it being, I think, competitive with Overwatch in some ways and being free. That is not trivial, given that Overwatch is a £35 thing. I think it is an interesting choice because I know I'm trying to, foist it on Dota pals, but I think it's an interesting choice for like groups of people who are into competitive games who might want to try something a bit different because the barrier to entry is non-existent.
Yeah.
And that I think is an interesting angle. Just inevitably, it's a little bit more social. I mean, and also, I think I would also recommend it to people who have maybe played a lot of Overwatch and are starting to get a bit burnt out on where that game is at the moment. Because I don't think Overwatch is a bad game. I've burnt out on it, and I suspect that in some ways Blizzard have bitten off. They've given themselves quite a big challenge with how they've decided to balance the game. Because there's another thing that Blizzard always do, which is like, we will balance it. They're not, for example, going to add a ban phase, which is a great way of copping out of a balance problem, right? If competitive Overwatch has a ban phase, you'd probably never see Ana. And that would make the game more interesting in some ways. I mean, maybe they don't have enough characters to have a ban phase, because you ban too much of the roster, then
What happens if they ban all the healers? But it could be interesting. You know what I mean? Like, the cool thing about having picks and bans is it pushes people to different parts of the roster rather than allowing set strategies to become a thing. And I think if you're kind of tired of that element of Overwatch, particularly if you're tired of the game comes down to which team can use press Q all at the same time in the right way, that's productive, but to an extent that is Overwatch. I think it's definitely worth checking out. But
you can have asymmetrical pick bans. Like, you could have 2 bans and 5 picks.
Yeah, which is very close to the traditional LoL model, actually.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, because they changed it. But yeah, like, but yeah, I think there's, it's more just maybe just an attitude thing. And, you know, I think maybe the fact that Paladins got most of its designers from a MOBA helps a bunch. But yeah, I'm definitely impressed by it. I think it's you know, it'd be interesting to see if it ever fully overcomes those comparisons, because there's a substantial degree to which the comparisons are Paladins' fault, because it does look a lot like Overwatch. There is also a degree to which maybe it's a bit just like unfortunate timing, because I mean, you know, Battleborn had the same thing of a bunch of people made games in similar art styles at the same time, but none of them will ever compete with Blizzard's marketing budget.
Yeah, for sure.
In terms of mindshare.
It's still the problem that, like, stuff like Lawbreakers has. Any sort of arena, fast arena shooter that wants to come out in the next sort of year, like, they're going to have to be different.
Yeah, I think it's basically, I very nearly completely overlooked it, and I think it's doing a bunch of interesting things. If you can overlook the shitty female character designs and the fact that when you first start playing it, you are going to think that the shield guy is Reinhardt, even though he plays nothing like Reinhardt, really. Like, that's just a thing. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see if people get over that. What are you up to, Pip?
Well, I think you've covered all of Paladins, so I don't really know what else to say.
You dipped into some Ludum Dare stuff lately, have you not?
Kind of. I was sorting through the most recent, like, Ludum Dare 37, which the theme was one room, and found just some quite sweet little games, but like, yeah, nothing that blew me away exactly, but just, it was nice to finally sit down and go back through, the lists, and especially through jet lag, find little projects. Like, there was one called Flower Shop where you get a little flower shop, which is the one room that is the central theme, and then you need to grow things to order as customers come to your window, and so every day you get a certain number of people turn up and say, oh, I want a blue flower, or I want something with heart-shaped leaves, or something like that, and you do a little bit of trial and error. You're allowed to grow 4 plants a day, that's all you've got room for, and so you try and fulfill the orders by doing that and working out what each combination of seed, fertilizer, and amount of watering produces. And it's fairly straightforward in that the time that I played, each of the 4 different seeds corresponded to a different colour of flower, and each of the different fertilizers corresponded to a different petal shape, and each of the different watering can sizes was the leaf thing. And so it was more about, you know, you did a bit of deductive, you know, trial and error at the start, and then you would just plug that in as people got more and more specific with their plant orders. Because, like, at first it's to encourage you to experiment and not feel penalised. It's like somebody turns up and just wants a blue flower, and somebody just wants any plant, you know? And so you can kind of, like, just try a few combinations and see what works and give people things. And I don't think it penalises you if you get it wrong. Like, the people are a bit, oh, this isn't what I asked for, but, like, you still get to go to the next day and stuff. And because I'd sort of figured out the stuff, like, I stopped playing after a while just because I knew that I could fulfill any order that came to the desk, and so I was a bit like, there's not really a reason to keep playing. But it was one of those just little projects that had quite sweet music and, you know, like kind of jaunty, and, you know, art that was endearing. And I think I would probably, like, I don't know, it's not an educational game, but it's the sort of thing that you might play with a kid who's learning, you know, basic logic or something, and just say, like, can you work this out, you know? And so I think things like that are just interesting. And then there was another one which was a one of those games where you have a grid of tiles and that represents a room, and some of them have, you know, fallen away. It's kind of like a slightly destroyed room, I guess, and you're a little dinosaur with a beret on and you're trying to leave the room, and all you can do is, if you stand on a tile, you can use your dinosaur mind powers to push objects away on, you know, any you know, the 4 directions coming out of your tile. Or you can click on an object that is along from you in any of those directions and pull it towards you with the power of your mind. And so it's about finding ways to manipulate those using just the 2 options to find your way out of a room. And there's only, I think, 7 different stages to that, and it feels very much like, I posted about it on RPS and someone said it feels very much like the tutorial for a bigger game, and they're right in that but the final puzzle still had enough bite that it kind of fulfilled, or it kind of made good on the promise of the game. Like it sometimes you play these things where somebody's had a decent idea or has a set of mechanics and you think, okay, I see the game that you could make from these ideas, but you kind of have no idea whether the actual implementation would be what's in your mind, or whether there's something you haven't thought of that is gonna lead it to disaster. But this was very much, you could make a really tight puzzle game out of this if, you know, if you extended it, or if you just like added a whole bunch more levels. That one has, I think it's a Slovakian title that translates as 1,000 Rooms, and I can't remember it because I can't pronounce it.
Show notes.
So that's gonna need to be a show notes thing. So yeah, and there was another one that I was playing while I had Silent Witness going on in the other monitor. Silent Witness is a kind of forensic crime drama, which is
Didn't
really...
you think it was really bad? It's the latest episode.
It's so grim nowadays. Like, I mean, it used to be
I haven't watched it for like 5 years.
Like, it's actually always been surprisingly grim. But like,
but it
I
feels
forget.
Like lame now, like really.
Well,
silly.
they do that thing of mistaking engaging with current issues for explaining both sides of the argument to each other in character. And you're kind of like, okay, so one of you is essentially taking the point of view of liberal newspaper article about immigration and people trafficking, and the other person is taking the sort of conservative anti-immigration.
It was so painful. It was like the moment where they cut to, here are some shifty Muslims, and then a lot of characters. Anyway, the spin-off Silent Witness podcast. We'll see.
But yeah,
Patreon.com.
So that was going on in the background, and the game itself is called Painted Red, and it is just this thing where you've got an incredibly tight time limit and a cloth, and you've committed a murder, you've disposed of the body, but now you need to clean up your room before someone comes, and you can hear, like, there's a knocking that kind of intensifies as somebody is, like, clearly outside your door, and you can kind of hear sirens at some point coming towards your place. And so you've got, like, these like, it's a really incomprehensible crime scene because there's like just miscellaneous gore and entrails like in odd places. Like there's a piece in the bin and there's a piece under a rug and then there's like a handprint on the side of the fridge and like one under a desk. And I'm like, what happened?
Jonathan Creek happened to murder scenes. That's what happened.
And that over Christmas, we need to talk about that as well.
That's
anyway,
a different thing anyway.
So I was kind of like, I had murder on one screen, I had cleaning up after murder on the other one, and it's like, it was just quite it's such a basic thing, and it was really annoying because I kept getting to the end of the time limit, and then it would like, it sort of, it doesn't fade to black, it fades to white, and then it pans in on the thing you've forgotten or one of the things you didn't find that clearly is going to be used in the court case against you.
Isn't it just a hidden object game in 3D then? Is it? Yeah.
Well, so it's a cleaning thing where you essentially need to hidden object the fuck out of things, but also the time limit is very much more of a, I guess, a factor. I did find myself getting tense, like when I couldn't find, or when I wasn't sure whether I'd found everything and it turned out that I hadn't, and then it showed me one of the things that, at least one of the things that I'd missed, and I was kind of like, okay. And then you start doing things like looking up, as well as looking down and, right. Like seeing if you can move anything. Or like,
there's a testicle in the chandelier. I didn't spot that before.
You're just like, oh shit. And then there's also things like, the cloth itself gets grubby. So it's like in Viscera cleanup detail where eventually you stop being able to clean up. So you have to start factoring in how clean the rag is and whether you're willing to make a trip to the sink or not in between trying to clean up bits and trying to sort of maximize the efficiency of that. And sometimes the sink water gets too dirty, so you have to run another batch of that.
It's very odd fantasy for a game to pursue, isn't it, really? But I guess as a game jam thing, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, so I actually, I really enjoyed that one, but in a sort of, it feels almost not exactly like a trick, but it's like they did put a time limit on a thing and made it really difficult to fulfill in that time limit. But people can do that, and I wouldn't go back to it 5 times and try and actually finish it or try and actually complete it. So they've clearly done a good thing within that. But yeah, I would have it felt odd that was the thing that I was playing. And then the final one, I don't think was part of that, but I think it was part of a game jam, and it was a thing by Krillbite, who are the people that made Among the Sleep, which is that toddler horror thing. And they had a project that was, I think it was called like In Case of Emergency, Head to the Lifeboats or something. And essentially you're on a sinking ocean liner, and you have a violin, and you can't stop the thing from sinking, but you can go up to the people who are panicking as the thing is sinking, and you use the corresponding buttons on your controller and, the analog stick to strum the violin? How do you're a music person, what is that? Scrape it? Like, how do you bow it?
Bow it?
Is that the term for?
Yeah, sure.
For
do whatever you want, really.
Caressing your violin with a stick. Like, what is
caressing it with a bow?
Yeah, what is that?
You bow it.
Playing a violin.
But I mean, I didn't know if there was like a term, because you can pluck a violin as well, right?
A pizzicato, yeah.
But anyway, so you saw your violin with your stick, but you need to pay attention to the colour of the panic above someone's head, so you know which notes will soothe them, essentially. And you're just trying to make people feel better as they die in a horrible shipwreck.
Wow.
So that's a thing.
Jesus, how does that relate to Room?
See, that I don't think, I as far as I remember, it wasn't part of the same game jam, but it was there as just a game jam game that they've recently uploaded. as a separate thing, I think. And so, yeah, that was the thing. It wasn't particularly successful, but I thought the idea was just quite funny.
Yeah, it's quite really dark.
It's like, because, even just things like moving around the space were a bit annoying. Like, it was hard to get the character to recognise you wanted it to go upstairs rather than walk behind the stairs and stay on that level. So, little bits and pieces like that. And I kind of didn't really get much pleasure out of the actual interaction, but it made me laugh.
That is hilarious, in fairness. Soothing people's death throes with
just a bit of, you play as the ship stick goes down, essentially. Yeah. I assumed the ship was supposed to be the Titanic, but,
it's
the
best bit of the Titanic.
So that's how I've spent my day, is essentially just surrounded by death.
That's what you do when you're jet lagged, I suppose.
And
best
plants.
Best bit in Titanic is when that bloke falls all the way down the deck like a little ball in a pachinko machine.
I don't know. I think the best bit is when she's like, "I'll never let you go," and then lets him go.
Yeah.
That was brilliant. I was just like, what, how? And to be fair, it had already been 12 hours at that point, and I was really done. Should have left at the end.
When I was, I think 9 years old, I got into a flat out, not friends anymore row with my best friend over whether the Titanic or the Full Monty was a better film. I was advocating for the Full Monty, and I think you'll find almost 20 years later,
you come out better on
that I can. I don't know. History has borne me out on that one.
What's his name? Robert Carlyle. Draw him like one of your French girls.
I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't. We weren't trying to conceive some mashup of the two and determine which proportion should be Titanic and which proportion should be Full Monty. I'm just saying.
Shall we do questions?
Yes.
I'm talking from my some organ.
That's Pip's diaphragm voice.
Hang on, which diaphragm?
Which diaphragm? How many diaphragms do you have?
I'm leaving that in,
Oh no. Oh.
First questions of 2017. We have many. They've been accumulating.
We had a lot of questions, not only over the break, but the fact that the last episode of the year was also a non-questions podcast. We did our 3.5 hour roundup, meant that we have a lot of questions. So we apologize if we don't get to yours. We have starred them in our inbox. God help you. Aaron writes, "Dear Caldwin and Corvo, Dishonored 2. Now that I have your attention, I have a question inspired by my experience with Dishonored 2. When it comes to bone charms, I find myself filling every available slot with charms that buff speed, faster slashing, faster stealth and the like.
He's got a bone in every slot.
I know, I tried to subtly imply that with the way I pronounced it, without raising a flag over that delicious innuendo. But there you go, Pip.
Yeah, but if you make it subtle, I won't understand that it's a sex thing at all.
It's like the Iwo Jima monument, just hoisting that thing up there, making it obvious for everybody.
What does that mean?
Like a famous American war monument. I don't know why I decided to reference. No, and that's probably offended somebody.
Well, I mean, I could only assume, given that you brought it up in the context of.
Oh well, it was my mistake initially, and now it's ours.
Oh.
Let's continue reading the question. I mean, quite a long break, if that wasn't clear.
Oh.
While I am by no means a speedrunner type, I find myself unable to resist the possibility of flitting about the shadows with just that much more efficiency. I also grab the agility-based powers early on. I follow this pattern in other games, your Dark Soulses, your pen and paper RPGs, etc. I guess when it comes down to it, I just want to be the best at moving around. My question: what buffs in games are you unable to turn down, even at the expense of others? And what does this say about your playstyle? Yoda?
That was my second diaphragm there.
Oh my god.
Having its own opinion.
No, I definitely can't cut out that thing you said.
Yeah, that's annoying. Oh well.
Just keeping it in the parts.
Oh well.
Yeah, this is an interesting question because I often, out of sheer impatience, pick certain stats over others. Because you see the same stats appearing in games over and over and over again. It's strength, it's kind of fortitude or constitution.
Dexterity,
speed. etc., etc. And they all mean different things in different games. And some of them mean persistently boring things like Constitution, or any sort of health buff where you have more health points, which obviously helps you stay alive. But I'm with the questioner in going for speed and attack. I always go for the kind of attack stats, wanting to wipe things out faster and just get through the game faster. And I think I'd be interested to hear if you both.
I used to be 100% on speed buffs all the time. Now I am a big fan of anything related to like cooldown reduction or stopping or like some way of skipping cooldowns.
To give yourself options.
Yeah, like anything that allows. So like a lot of the stuff I went for with Dishonored was all about refunding mana or getting mana back faster. Like I really always want to have more options, and I want to actually be able to do my abilities at my own pace. Like I hate sitting waiting for a cooldown.
Yeah.
Like Dishonored doesn't have cooldowns per se, but it has the window of time that it takes for your mana to regenerate. That if you use another spell within that time, you don't get that kind of potential mana. And that is something that you can kind of not tweak, but you can sort of affect the overall efficiency of that system.
Yeah.
And then in other games, like I like feeling that the limit on how much I can do in a space of time is me, not a set of cooldowns set by the developer. And also it just helps that in a lot of games that have those kinds of systems, cooldown reduction is an incredibly powerful thing because, obviously.
If you get a design ability that's going to matter, being able to do it over and over again quicker is always going to be really powerful, isn't it?
And I suppose to go with that, you'd want mana regeneration in most things as well.
Yeah.
Or like whatever the regeneration is for you.
Yeah, it's like whatever form it takes, whatever allows me to use my abilities more. I think maybe more broadly in the sort of thematic sense, like I used to like always play like the assassins and the ninjas and the speedy, quick, stealthy characters.
Yeah.
And now I tend to mostly play like in RPGs at least, like spellcasters and sort of, academics in pen and paper role playing. I like to be the sort of thinky, bookish character, I think, more than anything else. I play a lot of wizards in RPGs now. A lot of wizards.
Yeah, I think my penchant for speed is translated into RPGs. I think the last D&D campaign I played, I was a fox with 2 swords. It was incredibly fast. It was really good. It's interesting. I wonder if anyone listening actually likes the tank build. Anyone enjoys putting points into tanking.
Actually, so I would say that like if I'm playing a game seriously competitively, I almost always play tanks. Like that's like the thing I do in Dota really. Like, and it's the thing that I do a lot of in Paladins. I think there are a lot of universal concepts with tanks. This goes beyond like some kind of like personality derived personal preference into things that are just good.
Right.
Like, I mean, to an extent, cooldown reduction is just good, but it depends what you're trading it off for. Like, there's a general rule in, competitive multiplayer games that have any kind of, like stats stuff in them, that the things that are often the hardest for enemies to deal with are raw hit points and slows. And if you can combine both of those two things in a tank, you have a very good tank because you can keep people near you with slows and you're, absolute damage mitigation just through having more health is a legit thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe the kind of power of exerting that influence over other human players is satisfying, but maybe in a situation in an RPG, like an versus NPCs only, maybe that's just not as satisfying to be able to control.
I guess not. I played a tank in my first, one thing I liked about my, Pip. What were you going to say?
I'm going to put my hand up because,
I'll go at that.
Well, I do put points in tank, but it's for a very different reason. And it's because often I haven't figured out how to optimize the system. And so at least that gives you more wiggle room because you can survive for longer, or you can you have a bit more of a grace period while you try and come to terms with, whatever the situation is. Either if it's like a real time thing, people have unloaded a bunch of bullets into your face and you might still be alive at the end of it and have figured out which key combination you need. Or, if it's a turn-based thing, if you've fucked up whatever you've queued for that turn, you might still be able to get out of it or to work out the next part of a thing. And so I find that certainly on first playthroughs, something which is more about just damage and tanky is like a decent, like, basic combo, because it's like, I think that's the beginner character in a lot of ways for lots of things, because it's like kind of resilient and kind of punchy. And so games seem to understand that means you need, not that you need help, but that's a way that they are balanced to accommodate in a sort of very basic.
That you stay in the game space for as long as you can to learn the systems. Which is, I guess, why like the sword and board kind of trad D&D warrior is still just the default kind of pick.
I think I was going to say in defense of single player tanks, as well as I think my final kind of canon playthrough of Dragon Age Origins was as a pretty much a straight up tank. And one of the reasons I liked that is, as you know, like I was banging on about earlier, as a concept in a game, sorry, I think the rum is playing havoc with my voice.
You're not speaking from any of your diaphragms.
None of them. So as you point out, like being able to exist in the game world for longer is an absolute good in the vast majority of games. It doesn't matter what the game it is. Every game makes you trade off for it if it is balanced, because it is the thing, right? Like if you're alive in the game for longer, nothing else matters, right? Because you can do the thing, whatever it is that you're there to do. And it's, you know, next to then things like healing are also incredibly useful, but they don't appear in every game, etc., etc., etc. Living for longer, more health is always better. So having in a party RPG, having your protagonist, the character you create, who you probably want to always be around, fill such a core role that's always going to be useful, makes them not only consistently useful in every scenario. Like if it's the character you can't leave back at camp because it represents you, then, you know, maybe you don't get lots of use out of the tank companions that it gives you, but it means that you have that role filled, so you can maybe feel less pressure to, you know, you can do a lot more interesting things within a varied roster if your main character is a tank, I think, relative to any other role. Like, I'll give you the example, Pillars of Eternity, I played with a mage, and it doesn't really matter if I didn't get on with him. It's a long time before you find a tank other than the guy near the start. I suppose maybe actually the bad example of that is you can make your own companions,
for sure.
But you miss out on a lot of story if you do that, because you want to be bringing the written companions with you, right? Like the people with personality that respond to things.
Yeah.
Not randos that you created in a pub. And so I found that helpful just from a kind of, partly from a game point of view. It allows you to always be glad that your protagonist is there and maybe free up your options, because 4 tanks isn't invalid, but you always need 1. And then the other side of it is I always quite liked the fact that my main character, who's ostensibly the hero of the story, wasn't like hiding at the back in all these fights. It's like always at the front of it. It creates like an image that is maybe a little bit more appropriate to who the hero often is sort of presented as being in a lot of those games.
I'll usually go for lockpicking if that's a skill in anything. Like of the less kind of across all games skills, you know, the ones that are sort of a bit more localized or a bit more sort of tied to particular tranches of gaming. Lockpicking is definitely one of them. Luck, you know, kind of charisma-ish things that might yield more interesting conversational opportunities. Like that kind of stuff I'll usually try and pepper in, just because it tends to open up not exactly Easter eggs, but bits of the game where the developers had a bit more fun.
Yeah,
or
for
the
sure.
writers. Yeah. And sometimes stealth, because I'm shit at stealth generally. And so anything where I can get, you know, a helping hand is good on that front. And I quite like games like in Oblivion, you could level up stealth to the point where you could just walk up to someone's face in bright daylight and stab them and then still get the stealth attack bonus. And you just be like, I mean, sure, with my amazing sword that I nicked from some sort of Daedric realm, and now you're dead and I've got a soul gem. Brilliant.
Stealth in Skyrim is brilliant as well.
It's so broken.
Yeah, it's lovely. Love it.
Yeah, you can't see me because I'm good at crouching.
Yeah, I think you get better at it by just crouching everywhere you go.
Yep.
It's almost as if someone's visibility is determined not by physics or the way light works, but by how crouching they are.
I spent a long time in a bush, I think, in Skyrim, trying to work out what could see me because I was going to stab someone in the night and just take their things, I think. But like it kept doing that open eye, which meant that something could see me. And then after the longest time of like just wandering, crouching in the riverside, I realised it was a mud crab, so I stabbed it. And it had money on it, so I was like, bonus.
And a silver fork.
It was just like, hey, a few quid from the mud crab.
Yeah, that's great. The tree falls in the forest, and a man is crouching next to it, with no humans present. Does his stealth skill improve?
Does the tree own a fork?
Always. To both questions.
Yeah, exactly. Joshua writes, Dear Crate and Crowbar. So this is a response to a previous question from what will now feel like 1,000,000 years ago, but we'll go with it. So this is a question in episode 169 about games to play while riding a stationary exercise bike. And Joshua has a good answer, which is as follows. I was excited to hear Dan's question about what games to play while riding a stationary bike, as this is something I actually know something about. I've been playing games almost every day while riding a stationary bicycle for almost 2 years now, and doing so helped me train for a one-day 160-mile bike ride that I participated in and completed last year. So with my bona fides established, I feel confident in making some recommendations for anyone who wishes to exercise in this way. I found the best games to play while riding offer two things: good controller support for obvious reasons, and B, a sense of motion. He didn't establish that good controller support was A, but we'll forgive that. For this reason, I tend to stick to first or third person RPGs, shooters, and immersive sims. I've tried side-scrolling games, but the relatively static camera of most of these games tends to accentuate the tedium of stationary pedaling and slow me down quite a bit. The very best games for exercise are games which don't require too much concentration or accurate button presses and have lots of action. Although I haven't played it yet, I suspect that the new Doom meets all of these criteria quite nicely. Dan can rest assured that his brother is unlikely to come to harm while playing this way, as I've biked my way through Arkham City, Dunwall, Columbia, most of Thedas, and the Mojave Wasteland, and bits of other places with no ill effects. He also went on to, I think, to ask about pubs in Bath, but you know,
well, it's that separately.
Indeed. The answer is, if you have lots of people, the Westgate. If you're fond of sort of bikery pubs, rock and roll pubs that smell a bit like the Hobgoblin.
Yeah.
If you want locally brewed craft ale, the Brew House. Is that it?
That'll do.
That'll do.
Great. I love that people are playing games while playing on an exercise bike.
Actually, this makes me want an exercise bike.
Yeah, I want to do this.
Yeah, I want an exercise. Yeah, I might put my PlayStation on a little monitor above my. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
I can't imagine a world in which I play anything that involves movement on an exercise bike and my brain doesn't get confused with which direction I'm actually going, and I just fall off to one side in a
just play Wipeout
dramatic
while cycling. That would be. I want to do it now.
Faster, space car, faster.
Play Thumper.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Oh wow.
Oh, I think I might be sick. I might turn inside out.
In a really good way.
Yeah, jazz sick. You'd cycle in such a weird rhythm.
Yeah.
Like,
your heart would just stall, but it would feel great.
Yeah. You'd end up with the lean, dead body of an iron beetle.
See, I just used to watch TV shows, like a stationary bike or a treadmill or a what are they called? That thing with the arm movements as well.
Oh, like a cross trainer.
Cross trainer, yes. I used to just catch up on episodes of Midsummer Murders because, like, I'd go in the middle of the afternoon to the gym when I still went to the gym, like, locally when I was unemployed or semi-unemployed. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But they were doing that thing where they would split a Midsummer Murders episode in two and show it like just after the lunchtime news or whatever on Channel 3, and like obviously have like cut out some of the gorier bits. And so what you'd do is like you'd incentivize the next day of exercise by having watched the previous part.
Oh, I see.
You see. So, you know, what you'd really want is a really convoluted long-running series that you just like have to keep coming back to the next day.
But this is why I was thinking, like, something I've been talking about on the podcast for literally half a decade now, it feels like, is my inability to get through the Witcher series. Maybe this is how I do it.
Yeah,
I just promise myself a bit more Geralt time. I just keep on peddling.
But surely that's not the payoff, right? Like, there's a reason you haven't played the Witcher series, and it's not because you weren't being incentivized to do exercise
it's
while
because
doing
I didn't feel like I was getting a lot out of it. But if I'm getting a sort of extra benefit from the fact that it's occupying my brain because it seems like it'd be a good fit, because it's like immersive and you're not going to think too, you're going to be engaged in the story and stuff.
Biking across
Rivia.
Yeah.
Revita.
Well, I couldn't remember if it was the Riviera.
Yeah.
Geralt of the Riviera.
Jeremy of Rivita. Next. Burton Lancaster writes, how many times a week do you wish you had the scoop on Harambe? And that is the most amazing shitty spam we've ever received.
What fresh scoop is there on Harambe? Like, you know.
I think this spam for a PR firm wants us to make us wish that we were the ones that broke the news about Harambe. But that was never really the point, was it? The point was this, no one was like, it wasn't a scoop. It was an event.
What a first.
Exactly.
Like, it was a thing that became
an internet joke.
There weren't journalists waiting in the wings, waiting for the first time a zoo had to shoot a gorilla.
No. And then, like, I mean, you know, like, do you want to be responsible for breaking a news story that gets a zoo's Twitter account shut down because they can't deal with the Harambe comments every time they post a picture of penguins?
I should stress that that's not the end of that sentence.
Oh, okay.
The end of that sentence
is it not?
Or the Hillary email leak even. And those two things might not conflate. One of them is a genuine news story.
Quite advanced for a bot, I think.
Yeah, I think it might actually be a genuine press release from a PR firm.
Oh, that's even worse.
It made us laugh, so that's why we read it out. But
there you go.
Well, I only heard the first part.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, any attention is good attention. So I suppose we've played directly into their hands here. Team. Well done. Yep. They say after this, we can relate. We know how it feels to have not gotten the scoop on Harambe.
Oh, no.
Hang on, if they can relate, then, like, are they just a terrible PR firm? Like,
yeah, exactly. We miss shit all the time. God, I wish we'd come up with Harambe.
Like, you know, isn't it shit being, like, behind the times they say commiserating? Like, oh.
That's probably a real company. I don't think Burton Lancaster's the amazing spam name. I think that might actually be the name of an actual firm.
Do you want to beep it out then?
No.
Okay.
We're not the BBC.
But they literally sent it to us, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. If they didn't want us to read it out, they shouldn't have emailed it to questions at CreightonCrowbar.com for mockery. We skip a lot of shitty PR as it is, but that first line tickled me. Stephen writes, greetings, crepes and croissants. I've been playing a ridiculous amount of Super Hot lately, and I realize that Super Hot is a game that could have been made years ago. It is such a simple concept and art style that it almost could have existed as far back as the early 2000s with Quake-era graphics. Are there any recent games that you think could have been made decades ago? And why do you think it took until now to make them? ? P.S. Pip has been a wonderful addition to the podcast. Thanks.
That could have happened ages ago.
It could have happened ages ago, but you lived far away.
Thank you to Stephen, was it? I don't know, like, because there's a fair few things that, like, that use graphics or that are sort of simple enough that perhaps they could have existed years ago, but they didn't because the industry was structured differently and the gateways to actually being able to produce things were different. You know, you didn't have puzzle script, you didn't have Unity tutorials on YouTube, you didn't have, you know, all of these different access points that you now have. So even if stuff could have existed years ago, technically, the culture was very different and the access was very different. And the other thing I wanted to say was just that a lot of stuff that is, you know, kinda shitty pixel art side scrollers, which just infest my inbox, like, they also play on nostalgia that wouldn't have been nostalgic at that point. It would have just been, you know, a typical game that just didn't really have much scope. And so I think in some of their cases, like, obviously this isn't true for all of them, it's just, you know, the derivative stuff. It's like there sort of seem to be the hope that the nostalgia factor will also play into people's purchase decision, and obviously that wouldn't have been a factor when it was just current tech or current graphics.
Something that occurred to me was that there are games that are relatively simple technologically and in terms of the rules and the design of those games, or in fact they're based on games that have been around for ages, like Hearthstone and as it's derived from Magic, or something like Duelist as it's derived from grid strategy games, things like Final Fantasy Tactics and card games as well. There's nothing about those games in terms of their ideas or their presentation in some cases. Maybe Hearthstone would need dialing back a bit, that couldn't have existed ages ago. But what has changed is it's not even just the internet as a thing for running competitive games. It's the notion of a game as a kind of living service. Allows genres like collectible card games to find a home digitally.
Or episodic stuff as well.
That they
like
could never have
season
had.
Passes.
Yeah, although a lot of the games that those are attached to couldn't have existed just for technological reasons.
Yeah, I guess, like, yeah, okay, fine.
So it's just sort of, and obviously the
I mean, like, Telltale stuff, you know?
Yeah, maybe, like there's definitely well, that's maybe an interesting one, because there's probably a past where, like, Telltale stuff could have existed as maybe a point-and-click adventure game, but perhaps it depends a lot on, like, cinematic presentation and
they kind of did. I mean, Indiana Jones: The Fate of Atlantis was just like a licensed game that it was a fantastic game, but you know, it's kind of an early Telltale template, really. But I think Pip nailed it, really. It's just the gap between people who have ideas and the ability to realise those ideas has just narrowed fucking enormously in the last 40 years, to the extent that, you know, we're seeing lots more of those creative ideas actually becoming reality, like Braid, which you think, oh, Braid is kind of like a riff on Mario, except with fucking amazing time distortion mechanics that are really advanced and clever.
I think maybe the only other thing to mention would be the fact that things outside gaming maybe have also played a part, like, you know, the definition of what can be a game has maybe shifted, and so you end up with projects again that could have existed in different forms, or, you know, like in maybe a dialed back format in terms of the presentation or the processing power, but like wouldn't have done because people didn't conceptualize a game in that exact way, or, you know, that would have been the province of you know, movies or episodic TV or something.
Yeah, it's weird because you saw stuff like Space Ace, which was basically like a quick time event as a game. Like, the entire game was just, but it was also an animated movie that was animated at like quite high frames per second. Like, there's quite a high level of kind of time and money investment to create this kind of cartoon animation from start to finish. And it was kind of, if you release it today, it would just be savage to be not being a game at all. And I kind of equate that to walking simulators, in kind of air quotes, like the idea that actually if you create an environment, then that can also be a good form of entertainment, I suppose. But
So one thing that just occurred to me as well, and it's maybe the inverse of this, but like,
I was actually considering mentioning this as news, but obviously there are bigger things to talk about. Like, I really like Elite Dangerous a lot, even though it is at a fundamental level in a lot of ways, a game that has existed in one form or another. I mean, Elite went away for a while, but you could make and indeed they did make a vector graphics version of the game people play now, where you travel between space stations, trading commodities for higher value versions of the same commodities and making money and getting a different spaceship and so on. But that series, that even though the design idea is so consistent over the course of decades, and you indeed probably could, in quotes, make that game ages ago, because they literally did. Yeah. There's stuff about when you start to apply modern production values to that formula. It's not that you create a different game, but you bring the concept alive in a way that could only be gestured at before. And the thing that made me think about this recently was, and this has gone all over the internet, but there's been the first alien encounters in Elite now. And there's videos on YouTube. I'll put one in the show notes because I was going to, as I say,
it's amazing.
It's amazing. It's a brilliant bit of...
Even I thought so, and I'm not into spaceships at all.
It felt really magical. It felt like a fucking Steven Spielberg moment.
Yeah, it's a beautifully... It is essentially, in some ways, it's a moment when the game will not even break the fourth wall, but it breaks into a part of the game that you've always thought was basically the loading screen, which is a perfect time to do an encounter with something completely beyond your understanding.
Yeah.
And it's a brilliant sequence from the choreography of it, to the little details, to the way it interacts with the game's UI, to the sound design.
The fact it freezes your ship as well, and the way it kind of...
Yeah, you can hear the ice building up on your hull as it shuts you down.
Amazing.
It's an incredible sequence. Definitely recommend anyone watch it, because it demonstrates that even though they've added lots of online functionality and there's loads to it, but at its core, Elite is the same game it's always been. It's a good example of a game that, in a different universe where this was the first Elite game, you could probably point to it and say they could have made this years ago with different graphics, because the fundamental design of it isn't that complex.
Those games, like the X games, have tried to do that, but they've never established, they've never really nailed what Elite does.
Exactly, but so much of that modern technology and game craft when it comes to the whole experience adds so much to that I think it is a good example maybe of something moving the other way, where you can't almost imagine it being done now or a time ago. Makes me more excited. Makes me excited to return to it. Not because I want to go out and seek that particular surprise, because I now understand that that's just something that can happen to you now if you're in a certain area of space.
It's lost its magic.
It's lost its magic a little bit. But the notion that there is a team that talented making stuff like that to surprise players with is super cool. And again, it's something that can only exist in a modern era of not only modern production values, but games as these living things that will suddenly gain these strange new occurrences, even if all you're doing is funneling fish from A to B and then microchips back from B to A until you have a bigger cargo hold to repeat that process with. But yeah, basically I just wanted to find a segue to talking about the rad spaceship thing that happened.
Yeah.
But it's so good. I want to watch it now.
Show notes.
Jacob writes, Dear Buttery Biscuit Crate and Overexcited Crowbar, have any of you seen Time Commanders, either the original ones in the early to mid-noughties, or the BBC's recent brief toe in the water feeling revival? If you are not British, Time Commanders, before I move on to the question, is super weird. It's a TV show where people play Total War, basically.
Yeah, the challenge is that you command the army on, the show with, I think, don't you get, a big top-down, screen in front of you that you can...
Yeah,
it's like the Starship
to be a general
Enterprise.
On, and you've got, it's kind of the map screen from the Normandy, but with a big, rectangular thing instead of a floating hover world in front of you.
Anyway, he goes on to write, I'm afraid I don't have any more structured or insightful follow-up questions than thoughts. My own thoughts were mostly, really? Greg Wallace from MasterChef?
I know you want name recognition, but was there literally no one else? And Jesus, Greg Wallace, calm down. Thanks as ever for an excellent pod, Jacob. So, yeah, as we were saying, so I haven't actually seen.
To explain Greg Wallace to American listeners.
Greg Wallace is a British MasterChef presenter who I find very likable and loves pudding. Do you remember when we used to live together, Tom? That was our theory of basically that was the MasterChef meta functionally. I can't remember what was the other guy's name?
John Turode.
John Turode. He's the main presenter, like a sensible BBC presenter.
And Greg Wallace is just kind of his mate.
His mate who makes vowel sounds rather than commentary.
John's the kind of the harder to please member of the
He's the guy with standards.
You had to if you wanted to impress him,
stern one.
You had to
and then Greg is the but you tried.
Yeah, exactly.
And also here's a random orgasmic vowel sound representing your pudding.
He says eating
it's a slightly muffled, crummy kind of
groan of some sort, and with a hint of shock and also excitement. And that's Greg Wallace. That's what he does.
But that was the metagame for because both of their opinions matter as judges, and the metagame for MasterChef appeared to be if you wanted to win over John, you had to be an amazing chef, and if you wanted to win over Greg, you had to, the first two courses had to be palatable, and then you made
custard
pudding, apple pie and custard.
Or you just put custard on the main courses.
Exactly.
As long as custard was involved in some part.
Custard was definitely an OP modifier.
Very, very.
This is very different to the MasterChef I remember, because I used to watch the one from the late 80s, early 90s with Lloyd Grossman, because my mum really enjoyed it. And it was you had these 3 kitchens, and they were the red kitchen and the blue kitchen and the yellow kitchen, and people would be cooking in them, and
then you had to pick a Charmander or a Squirtle
and then but if you got knocked out, your kitchen would fade to black because the rest of the studio was in darkness, and it would just they'd turn the lights out on you.
Really? They should bring that back.
But back in the day, coulis was overpowered. That was the dinner modifier.
Yeah. John will like it if you do a jus.
Do a jus.
Yeah, if you do it, he'll like it.
Loves that shit.
But Greg
used to be very minimalist as well. Minimalist presentation all over the shit.
Defrost a Viennetta, and you've won Greg Wallace.
I feel like that the MasterChef Squirtle you've described has evolved into Greg Wallace over a period of 15 years. And anyway, we're talking about British television instead of.
What was the question?
Time Commanders.
Oh,
it's presented by Greg Wallace,
which is a very British piece of television. It was about a bunch of years ago, 5-6 years ago, I think they first tried to do it, and it was really awkward. It was basically they got members of the public into a kind of really shitty CG Starship Enterprise set and made them try to command a Napoleonic army on a screen in front of them. And I've not seen the new one, and I would like to.
I've only seen extended clips of the new one, not a full episode.
Okay.
But the format now is it's 2 teams. And there's some structure for swapping commanders around. It doesn't really work. I think the first episode is literally nerds v jocks, as far as I can tell.
Okay.
Why are the jocks even in the studio then? If that's the premise.
Jog to there.
They can't even be they haven't even got the cartoonishness of these stereotypes, right?
I assume that it works a lot like the film Battle Royale. They're just on a bus and then they get gassed and wake up in Greg Wallace's war
I have
dome.
to fight an RTS campaign
exactly.
in Rome Total War.
And so, and they have the main action and there's a battle going on. It's usually a battle from history. And then on the side they have real TV historians ready to answer questions about what really happened and what might happen.
Oh yeah, you can use them as your military advisors, can't you?
But there's the funny thing is the faint but never acknowledged disconnect between real history and the game, because the game is obviously not realistic necessarily. I mean, I think it's a modified version of Rome 2 that they play. And so, that is not 100% realistic. It gives the game an enormous benefit of the doubt, because it'll cut to somebody saying well, I think you'll find the Triarii would always hold the center of the Roman line. And they would never flee, and this is blah, blah, blah. And then it will cut to Greg Wallace looking an elephant as it charges in. It was
Great. top entertainment.
Exactly.
I can't believe we haven't sat and watched this, because I only remember the old version, and I think that was because it was on, like, I don't know, UK Gold or something when I was a student and had access
it was a BBC
to that
thing initially, yeah.
But yeah, it was... Oh.
Essentially, this whole bit will have meant nothing to you if you're American, or Canadian, or any other part of the world, but we should watch this, actually.
Yeah.
I have a
weirdness.
So in their initial write-up of it, Eurogamer, well, Chris Bratt from Eurogamer, admitted to having had applied to be on this season of Time Commanders.
There's no man better suited.
And I can think of nothing I would want to watch more than that. And that is not a joke. That is, yeah, I want to see Chris Bratt from Eurogamer on Time Commanders. And
do you know what though? I knew someone at uni who applied to go on Coach Trip, the Channel 4 show. I would pay money to see Bratters on Coach Trip. Like, you know, just travelling around on a bus around Europe trying to get on with everybody.
To be completely fair, I will watch any video with Chris Bratt in it.
Yeah.
So there is that.
Have we answered the question?
I don't know. I almost got into the uni friend that won a reality TV show one-upping competition there.
I think, I think we've exhausted Time Commanders and we've agreed to watch it.
Yes, that's fine.
And alienated everyone outside of the UK.
Okay, good. That feels like a good, yeah.
Good tangent, everybody. Drew writes, oh wow, this is a games question. Most anticipated games of 2017.
I am really excited about Absolver.
So am I.
Mostly because I saw Josh post a GIF recently. I was like, all I want is to perform extremely precise, exciting combat maneuvers in that world that looks amazing.
Look gorgeous. This is
really want to play that.
Indie martial arts MMO thing, not an MMO perhaps?
Yeah, it's really ambiguous what they're trying to make, but everything they've showed has been their combat system, and that's really exciting.
Kicking people in the head.
Like the way I imagine it, it's like it's almost, you know, not Jedi Knight, 'cause Jedi Knight was kind of really kind of
quite
analog
abstract
and articulate and abstract, and about just kind of like where your actual lightsaber is when you're moving. But this is much more like a beat 'em up, where it's like you're putting these precise movements, precise dodges, and I'm really excited about the animations, the way those impacts kind of happen in the videos they've shown so far, that it makes it look like quite a tactical, strategic kind of tete-a-tete for those combats, and also it looks beautiful, and yeah, really want to play it.
I'm looking forward to For Honor on the same
yeah.
notion, actually. I really liked what I've played of that so far in various beta tests, and actually on one press trip in which I accompanied Chris Bratt from Eurogamer, who I played in a duel, which is on YouTube, which I'll put in the show notes.
Nice.
Which is quite funny. I look forward to that as another melee combat game that, I like the amount of support that they gave Rainbow Six, and I hope it gets a similar amount.
Yeah,
I think it's got some balance things to address, but I really like it. Like, it's a cracking game. Also looking forward to Mountain Blade 2 on the same note. Just in terms of while we run out of weird analog melee combat games.
Here it comes.
Pip, what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to Garagoa finally coming out, which is the storytelling puzzle game, which is really beautifully illustrated, and you manipulate different panels of a sort of picture book to make them do different things, and you can sort of zoom in to maybe a window to then change that into being a door in a different panel, and you know you can get an apple to suddenly run
that
over
game.
into it. Yeah. So that should be out this year, I believe. It now has a publisher, things like that, so that could be grand. And there's a demo of it that people can play. It's been around for a while, so you might already have, but we can maybe put that in the show notes. And also I might have got this horribly wrong, but I think I remember seeing that Manifold Garden is coming out this year, and that's just a really interesting looking thing. Like I think I looked into what it actually was at one point, because I wrote a story about it, but the thing that sticks with me is just the style, and it's got this amazing kind of geometric look to it that I want to tinker with and play with, and there have been some amazing looking GIFs from the developer posted on Twitter, so definitely link to that as well, I think.
I feel like any big budget stuff that anyone's excited about?
Mass Effect. Oh, and yes. I know that you're not so much, Tom.
Not yet, but I mean, I want to be.
I'm not either.
So the reason I am, so the recent trailers and stuff that have come out, I think have given a much better sense of what the game is. And the thing that strikes me is how much it looks like Dragon Age Inquisition. Both in terms of it move to an open world, and I think the things they changed about Dragon Age's combat to make it sort of open worldable weren't as obvious, because it's less obvious that changing an RPG into an open world game where you roam around and fight bands of mobs is, I think the place everyone goes with that is MMO. Whereas changing a shooter into a game that has an open world, much more freeform combat it's a much more obvious, much more dramatic change from what Mass Effect 2 and 3 were specifically.
It's like a Borderlands, isn't it, really?
Well, it's like Mass Effect 1 as well, which is the other thing, right? Which was also designed to kind of have a load of RPG systems to work in an open world. I think it feels a lot like an attempt to get Mass Effect 1 right, actually. If you think about the priority placed on traveling around in a Jeep and going to alien planets and all of that stuff, whereas the subsequent Mass Effect games were much more crafted third-person shooters. I'm looking forward to it because, like, I don't think the minute-to-minute combat looks as compelling as it was in the second and third Mass Effect games. I think that's a genuine concern. However, I'm looking forward to the idea of having a big, well-realized galaxy to explore and, like, a cool spaceship to fly around in and a new story to discover in that universe and something to sort of sink into for a while. I think, like Inquisition, I suspect it will end up as a less directed experience, and particularly Mass Effect 3 was, because Mass Effect 3 was nothing but just like a parade of set-piece endings to series-spanning conflict.
Sure.
It's obviously not linear in terms of the plot, but it is linear in terms of kind of what you do to some degree. Whereas I expect this to be more like Inquisition in that the main story takes the form of like 6 or 7 big flagship missions, and linking that is a shitload of tooling around in an open world, which I know people hated about Inquisition, but I really loved it about Inquisition. Because I just loved, like, you know, people had the complaint that Inquisition was basically like a single player MMO and that was terrible design. I actually kind of liked it because it was an MMO you could finish. You could, like, just hoover up stuff in a fun open world accompanied by well-written characters, and then, yeah.
Yeah, but it felt to me like an RPG that had this giant tumorous MMO design just fucking plugged into it.
I found it benign, I guess.
Okay, yeah, maybe that's the difference. Is that when I play it mission to mission, I found Inquisition really exciting. And it looked beautiful. The translation, like BioWare translated Frostbite brilliantly. It looked amazing. They were able to do their concept art like really well. And that's a really exciting thing about the new Mass Effect, the fact that they can do that with the Mass Effect series and give you those fucking amazing worlds and those vistas and those kind of the sensation of flying around the universe. But I don't know. I don't know what to latch onto with this. Even I love the Mass Effect series. But there's nothing about Andromeda that I can really get excited about. It's really weird. I mean, maybe it's just me being burned out on the series, but I would obviously play it. I hope it's great.
I think I have that too, because the 3 formed a narrative that I was by that point invested in, and because I played 1 and then I was like, oh, actually I do want to stick with this and see how it goes, and I quite enjoyed the switch to a world that didn't feel so sprawly. Like, it felt compact in a way that I like, because I don't like feeling so overwhelmed by things to do and possibilities at any given point. It's just like, it's kind of like how this is going to sound like such a weird analogy, but I hate sleeping without a duvet on, no matter how hot it is, because I like the feeling of there being a slight limit to a space. Whereas, being in too much of an open world just feels like someone's ripped the fucking covers off and has just gone, right, well. And the other thing is that I have not historically felt any compulsion to go to a spin-off, particularly, even if I've loved a universe. Like I have, like there's a trilogy of books that I am so into by Patrick Rothfuss, and I'm waiting on the third part at the moment. And there is actually I think it's a novella or something that's set in the same universe and, all of that stuff. But I have no compulsion to read that, even though I'm desperate for the third part of this thing to come out. Like, it's not, like, even though something is set in the same universe, it doesn't seem to cater to the same itch, I guess. Same as, I wouldn't necessarily, like, I like The Hobbit, no interest in Lord of the Rings. I've read the Harry Potter books, but no interest in the spin-off stuff. It's like, yeah.
I struggle to overcome that.
Diluted experience, but yeah.
But maybe that's why doing Mass Effect 1 again is the right thing to do. Maybe by the end of this game you will care about a new band of characters.
I hope so. I'm always going to play it based on, the good experience I've had with the previous series. It's just I don't feel presently that excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't had the hook yet, the thing that will get me interested.
I mean, they showed a galaxy map where things go bong, 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 bong. So I'm in.
It's good shit.
Yeah, it's good shit. Finally, Nick writes, where do you all... Oh, no, it's not the last question. I skipped one by accident. Quickly, I'm going to dial back.
One-word answers.
Well, let's have... We'll answer this one, and then we'll get to the next one. That's how that works. Nick writes, where do you all lie on the Renegade/Paragon light/dark scale? And I think when we discussed this, we realised that we'd rather do this in terms of D&D.
Yeah, which is kind of telling. It's like D&D is always it's such an elegant.
It's an elegant way of placing somebody.
Yeah, it really is.
So
I can't really remember the criteria for any of the D&D classifications, though.
So you've got good, neutral, and evil.
Is that pretty much what it sounds like?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you've got
There's
true.
no, hidden...
Is it... It's true...
It's lawful, chaotic, and...
Oh, it's not true, isn't it? Is it just lawful? What were we missing? The third part of that grid?
There is a third part, the mysterious.
I think it's true. I'm sure it's...
Normal. Average. Unadventurous.
This is what the unprepared final
It's
moments
chaotic or lawful, that's the other axis.
Are you sure?
I think.
Are you sure it's not a 3x3
So,
grid?
for example, if you're neutral, you could be chaotic neutral, or you could be lawful neutral. Or lawful good, chaotic good.
That's the sound of us looking it up.
I would never normally do this, but I'm Googling this. I was so sure it was a 3x3 grid, and I think it is.
Ah.
It is true, is the third one, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It's...
But what does true mean?
It's true neutral. There's only... So there's... So... Lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil, lawful neutral good, true neutral, neutral evil, chaotic good, chaotic neutral, chaotic evil.
But so what does true mean in this?
Well, so true only applies to neutrality because it's
true neutral.
Because you are truly neutral. You are not.
From the Grey Planet, Futurama.
Yeah, you have no strong feelings one way whatsoever.
Tell my wife hello.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, is where we fit on this chart.
So does true presumably doesn't apply to...
I don't think any of us are true neutral.
We're not true evil.
No, none of us are true evil. No, there's no such thing as true evil. True evil would be pretty much...
Darth Vader.
No, but so does true just mean totally?
Hang on, this chart is wrong. What am I doing?
I'm so confused.
I think true complicates this whole thing.
I think it does. Let's just talk about whether we're evil or not, which seems to be the answer to this question.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm a lot less nice than people seem to think. And I don't know why they think that I am nice. When Alice and I have conversations, people sort of gradually realise that she's the nicer one of us. I really don't know why they start off with any other type of expectation.
I think we should recognise that renegade means chaos in the D&D spectrum. So you could renegade.
Like everyone is good in Mass Effect. Really, it's kind of like whether
basically.
It's like it's from chaotic good to lawful good. Really, the Mass Effect chart.
Yeah.
So what does chaotic mean?
It means like lawful means that you follow like a sort of, there's like an order to your, like maybe a set of rules or a set of principles that you adhere to rigidly. So it's basically
cerebral versus animalistic. Maybe.
Yeah, or like reactionary good versus structured, principled good.
Okay.
So, yeah, Batman is chaotic good because he's not, whereas Commissioner Gordon is lawful good.
Like id versus superego, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I think I'm...
As pod guests, I don't know, really. I'm probably lawful good. Not very chaotic. Yeah. I just obey the law, go about my business.
Chaotic is probably far more me.
What are you, like, good or evil though, Pip?
Probably like more towards neutral.
Neutral, lawful neutral.
Chaotic neutral, is that a thing?
No, because chaotic neutral is like, you end up neutral because you veer from good to evil. But you never veer to evil that I know of.
I was going to buy you membership of the Michael Bublé fan club simply because you said that you'd be happy with anything I got you for your birthday.
That's not evil.
And I wanted to call you on that. You said that it would have ruined your birthday.
Yes, but it's not...
And I still was going to do it.
I think that's chaotic, definitely.
I think we maybe go with... I think Pip is actually might be chaotic neutral.
Yeah, maybe so. Which makes Pip completely unpredictable. Yeah. Literally anything could happen.
No one realises this.
There's no
I think...
What's the other thing? I was going to, like, spend a year giving you one playing card a week as part of your birthday present, and then just never give you the final card. So it was just a useless gift that had taken an entire year to drip feed into your life.
We might be drifting towards chaotic evil. No, we'll go with chaotic neutral.
Especially with the laughter. The delighted laughter really suggests.
Yeah, I realise it.
A degree of kind of enjoyment of
I think it's more like process. I like being a pain in the arse. And I don't know where that fits on the D&D thing because I don't know if D&D caters to pain in the arse.
Yeah, chaotic evil. Yeah, okay. That's it.
Chaotic evil.
Chaotic evil. Good. Sorted.
I think I might be... You can't really have to be between.
So are you my nemesis, Tom?
What am I?
Lawful good.
Yeah, you were lawful good.
Yeah,
that's
I'm
like
a fucking
an opposite.
Boring paladin.
You're the opposite of me.
Oh no!
I thought it was the other Tom, but we were wrong all along. I think I might.
This is an ongoing fucking pod saga.
Chaotic good, I guess. I try and do right by people, try and be kind, understanding, but I don't write it down. I guess that's the difference. I don't know.
Question answered.
Ish.
Kind of.
It's very rare that we have to consult anime Google image search to D&D alignment chart because it's the first thing that shows up.
You should have looked up Matt Elliott's D&D chart of crisps.
Oh, that was which Warhammer races correspond to which crisps.
Okay.
But although Matt Elliott of Games Radar and I have made extensive which people in the office or which D&D alignment charts in our own time.
What crisps would you two be?
It's an outside question.
But
will we filled it? Just decide.
Oh, Americans
it's not for me to decide, frankly.
Have a horrible time with this, aren't they?
I would be a space raider.
Would you? Cheap.
Cheap.
You can pick you up at the corner shop.
Broadly unpleasant, but fine in a small amount, which is why it's only a tiny, cheap bag.
Lots of flavourings.
Yeah.
I can't answer it.
Vinegary.
All I can think of is crisps I want to eat right now.
I'm now thinking of Skips, just because they're fun.
I like Skips.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, Pip, you'd be Skips.
Would I?
Yes.
Oh. I was trying to play Tom a compliment. fine. I'll take the skips.
I don't know. This has gone so far.
I think you might be like McCoy's Tom.
Oh, crinkle cut.
Yeah,
right.
I suspect you'd be a crinkle cut shape.
Shall we try and end?
Yeah, we should definitely end this.
Is that the last question?
Yeah, it is. Let's say that it is. Because for heaven's sake.
Was the other one a quick one?
Yeah, it was. It was what was the best representation of Bath in a game, writes John Roberts, but not that John Roberts.
The only one we could come up with was Regency Solitaire.
Sold. Yeah, basically.
Because that has an actual, like, you can visit Prior Park, and that has the actual bridge that you see in one of the illustrations that they use in Regency Solitaire. Great game. Go buy it.
Cool.
Love that game.
Top game.
Oh, I'm really excited about Shadowhand. Hopefully that will come out this year.
What's Shadowhand?
It's their new game.
It's their sequel, which is kind of a prequel, because Lady Cornelia Dartmoor is Shadowhand, and this is the story of like that
Solitaire game.
Battle Solitaire.
You use Solitaire to battle AI opponents.
Highwaymen and the like.
Yeah, she's a highwaywoman who gets to like wear fancy outfits because cards and so forth.
Well,
it's great. It looks great.
Can't wait.
But you'll have to.
Shit.
But not, hopefully, as long as if we'd done this last year.
Indeed. That is all of the questions we've got time for, and indeed should probably answer for our own sake as well as yours.
I think we should have answered 2 fewer.
I agree completely.
Absolutely correct.
Very rarely have to turn around and Google image search something on this podcast, but we did that anyway. If you would like to send us a question for a future episode, you can do so by emailing questions at crateandcrowbar.com. You can also find us on Twitter at crateandcrowbar and hang out with our rad community on our Discord channel, the link for which will be in our show notes, and we really should see about setting up some kind of easy to remember URL for that, which is entirely possible. I just haven't done it. Pip.
Also, back us on Patreon at some point.
Could do. I wouldn't recommend doing it right now, but we are going to be, with updated information, crateandcrowbar.com/Patreon. Obviously, if you want to, you're not going to get charged until we actually set it up properly.
If you fancy throwing, if you liked the 10-minute whiffle that we did at the beginning and thought that could lead anywhere exciting.
Well, sure. I'm just saying that, people might want to hold off until we've sort of formally kind of laid out exactly what we're doing.
I was trying to go for a kind of, hey, if you liked this, you might want to consider looking at the Patreon page. But this is really like, you're harshing my melon.
Harshing my melon.
Whatever the phrase is. What is the phrase?
It's not harshing my melon. Oh no, we've only been back for an hour or whatever it's been.
We need some
3
fucking
hours.
Practice is what we've discovered.
Yeah. I mean, how can we ask people to pay us for this?
I don't know.
All right. Why don't you unharsh our melon by pitching, only $1?
Oh, it's twisting my melon.
Is it?
No, from the song.
What song?
The Happy Mondays did Twisting of the Melons.
This is classic chaotic evil Pip.
I think this might be chaotic neutral.
I've ruined the pod. Shall we just end it?
Yeah. Okay. Patreon.com/crateandcrowbar. Updated information probably within a week from about the time you listen to this. Only $1 could keep Pip's melon from being harshed.
We could do it. The harsh of the melon would be the S with the $sign.
What?
That's my new logo.
A melon with $1 on it.
Right. Chris,
you're not a...
No, like harsh, but with the S being the $sign.
Sign.
Like, that would be my harsh melons.
What the fuck are we talking about?
Pip started her own cult over there, and we're going to finish this.
Okay,
now.
fine.
I agree. So many things.
You had a cup of tea.
Turn off my microphone.
I can't. Pip's actually muted her mic.
if you
reach sort of Pip event horizon here that I didn't know existed anyway.
I said it in the beginning of this podcast. It's the Omega Pip.
Oh shit. There are no more
It's the third stage of this JRPG boss battle. We've been in this.
Just say the thing that makes it stop.
She's crying.
They're only going to be able to hear that as a distant screaming on our microphones, Pip, because you muted yours. Okay.
Anyway.
No, wait, hang on. I got to do the end of the... So, hang on. If you'd like to follow us as individuals...
Oh, God, I'll have to turn it back on.
You can do so.
Oh.
I am at C Thurston, that's CTHURSTEN. Tom Senior is...
I am at PCG Ludo, which is LUDO.
Pip.
I'm at Philippa War, which is at PHILIPPAWARR. I will not be taking questions about any of this.
This is even better than the Trump.
Let's not go there. It's too late in the day.
It's very true. Thanks for listening. Everybody.
Bye.